The rain fell in sheets over the narrow streets of New Orleans, drumming against the worn pavement and washing away the day's heat. Huddled under the thin protection of a tattered jacket, Alex Lynn clutched his backpack closer to his chest, protecting what little he had left in this world. 3 days without a proper meal had left him lightheaded. His stomach no longer growled with hunger. It had given up on that futile protest hours ago. Now it just ached, a constant hollow reminder of how far he had fallen. Just last spring he had been sitting in the prestigious halls of one of America's finest music schools, his future bright and promising. Now, at 23, he was just another desperate face in a city that had seen plenty of dreams wash away with the rain. The neon lights of Bourbon Street reflected in puddles as he walked, creating dancing colors that reminded him of the way his grandmother's apartment had looked at Christmas, with strings of colored bulbs hanging from every possible corner. The memory made his throat tighten. "I'll make it right, Nai," he whispered, his breath visible in the cool evening air. "I promise." His grandmother had sacrificed everything to nurture his talent from the moment she'd caught him at age 4, playing by ear on an old keyboard at a neighbor's house. She'd worked 3 jobs to pay for his lessons, her hands growing more gnarled and worn with each passing year. When she got sick, there was no question in his mind school could wait. Her care couldn't. The doctors had done their best, but the bills piled higher than their hopes. By the time she passed, Alex had sold most of what they owned, emptied his savings, and deferred his scholarship. Then came the letter. Due to budget cuts, his deferment couldn't be extended another year. Just like that, the door to his future slammed shut. Alex stopped walking when he saw it. Bellini's. The jazz club stood like a beacon among the tourist traps, its warm golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. Through the windows, he could see people inside, laughing, eating, living lives where hunger was just a temporary inconvenience before the next meal. But what caught his eye wasn't the food or the patrons. It was the piano he could see sitting in the corner. Even from outside, he could tell it was neglected, positioned awkwardly, almost apologetically, as if the owner had considered removing it altogether but never quite got around to it. For the first time in days, Alex felt something stir inside him besides hunger. His fingers twitched at his sides, remembering the feel of keys beneath them. "Worth a try," he murmured to himself, pushing his wet hair from his forehead and straightening his posture as best he could. He knew he looked rough. 3 days of sleeping on buses and in shelters when he could find space hadn't done him any favors. But his grandmother had always insisted on dignity, even when they had little else. The warmth hit him first when he pulled open the heavy wooden door. Then the smells: butter, garlic, roasting meat, and the earthiness of good beer. His empty stomach clenched painfully, and he had to pause for a moment, one hand on the door frame to steady himself. "Can I help you?" The hostess's voice was polite but wary. Her eyes swept over his damp clothes and the backpack clutched to his chest. "I'm looking for the manager," Alex said, summoning a confidence he didn't feel. "Or the owner." Something in his voice, perhaps the lack of slurring, the clear diction that his years of training had instilled, made her hesitate rather than immediately turning him away. "Wait here," she said, and disappeared into the back. Alex stood awkwardly by the entrance, painfully aware of how out of place he must look. A few patrons glanced his way, their expressions ranging from curiosity to discomfort. He fixed his eyes on the piano in the corner, focusing on it rather than their stares. It was an older model, probably from the 70s. Even from a distance, he could see that at least 2 of the keys were chipped. The finish had dulled with age and neglect, but to Alex it looked like possibility. "I'm told you're asking for me." The voice was deep and carried the distinctive local accent, softened vowels, and a musical quality that suited the atmosphere of the club. The man was tall with broad shoulders and deep lines around his eyes that suggested he smiled often, though he wasn't smiling now. "Are you the owner?" Alex asked. "Tom Bellini. This is my place." He crossed his arms, his expression guarded but not unkind. "If you're looking for work, we don't have any positions open. If you're looking for a handout—" "I'm looking for a trade," Alex interrupted, the words coming out in a rush before his courage could fail him. He gestured toward the piano. "I can play. Really play, in exchange for a meal." Bellini's eyebrows rose slightly. He glanced at the piano, then back at Alex, taking in his worn appearance more carefully. "That old thing? Half the professionals refuse to touch it. It's been out of tune for months, I don't mind, Alex said quickly. I can work with it. A server passed by with a tray loaded with steaming plates, and Alex couldn't help but follow the food with his eyes. His empty stomach twisted painfully and he swallowed hard, Bellini noticed. Something in his expression softened slightly. When's the last time you ate, kid? Alex considered lying but found he didn't have the energy. Properly. 3 days ago. Bellini sighed, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Look, I get guys in here all the time claiming they're the next big thing. Everyone in this city thinks they're special. I don't think I'm special, Alex said quietly. I just think I'm hungry, and I have something to offer in exchange for food. Not asking for money, just a meal. A moment of silence stretched between them, broken only by the ambient noise of the restaurant. Clinking glasses, murmured conversations, the distant sound of a trumpet from somewhere down the street. What's your name? Bellini asked finally. Alex Lin, Chinese American. Born in San Francisco, raised by my grandmother. Bellini nodded slowly, as if this information somehow mattered in his decision-making process. His eyes drifted to the piano again, then back to Alex. One song, he said finally. You get one song. If it's good, and I mean really good, you get a meal. If it's not, you leave without a fuss, deal? Relief washed over Alex so intensely that for a moment he felt lightheaded. Deal. Follow me, Bellini said, turning and walking through the restaurant. Alex followed, acutely aware of the eyes that tracked their progress. The restaurant was about 3/4 full, mostly with what looked like locals rather than tourists. The lighting was dim and warm, creating pools of amber around each table. Jazz played softly from hidden speakers, providing background without overwhelming conversation. It hasn't been tuned in about 8 months, Bellini explained as they reached the piano. It looked even worse up close. The black finish was dull and marked with water rings from careless patrons setting down their drinks. The guy I used to have come in to play retired last year, and I haven't found a replacement worth keeping. Alex set his backpack down carefully at his feet. He ran his fingers lightly over the keys without pressing down, feeling their smooth, worn surfaces beneath his fingertips. May I? Bellini gestured permission. Be my guest. Alex pressed one key, then another. The piano was indeed out of tune, but not as badly as he had feared. He played a soft C major chord, letting the notes hang in the air. I've heard worse, he said with the ghost of a smile. Bellini's expression remained neutral. One song, he reminded him. Make it count. Alex nodded, taking a seat on the bench. It wobbled slightly beneath him. One leg was shorter than the others, with a folded coaster wedged under it as a makeshift fix. He adjusted his position, finding his center of balance. For a moment, he simply sat there, his hands resting lightly on the keys. The hunger, the exhaustion, the grief of the past year. All of it seemed to recede as he closed his eyes and took a deep breath. What should he play? Classical would show his training, but in this setting, with this audience, his grandmother's voice seemed to whisper in his ear. Music is about connection, little one. Play what speaks to their hearts, not what impresses their minds. He opened his eyes and began to play. The notes started softly, a gentle introduction that didn't immediately command attention. A few nearby conversations paused briefly, then resumed. Alex didn't mind. He wasn't playing for their attention yet. He was introducing himself to the piano, learning its quirks and temperament. The melody began to take shape. Something original, a piece he had composed for his grandmother during her final months. It started simply, almost like a lullaby, then gradually grew more complex, weaving in elements of the traditional Chinese songs she had sung to him as a child, but framed within the jazz-influenced structure that seemed fitting for this place. As his confidence with the instrument grew, so did his volume and intensity. One by one, conversations around the room began to still. A server paused, tray in hand, listening. Even Bellini, who had started to walk away, stopped and turned back. Alex's fingers moved with increasing certainty, finding their way around the out-of-tune notes, sometimes incorporating them as intentional dissonance that resolved into unexpected harmony. The piece told a story, his story of love and loss, struggle and hope. Every missed meal, every night spent wondering where he would sleep, every memory of his grandmother's encouraging smile, all of it poured through his fingers and into the music. By the time he reached the final movement, the restaurant had fallen completely silent. The only sound was the piano, and the story it was telling through his hands. When the final note faded, Alex remained still, eyes closed, fingers resting lightly on the keys. For a moment, no one moved or spoke. Then from somewhere in the back of the restaurant, someone began to applaud. Others joined in, the sound swelling until it filled the room. Alex opened his eyes, somewhat startled by the response. He looked up to find Bellini staring at him, his expression unreadable. The applause continued around them. "Well," Bellini said finally, "I guess you've earned that meal." Bellini led Alex to a small table in the corner near the kitchen. The table wobbled when Alex leaned on it, and the location wasn't exactly prime. Staff constantly brushed past on their way to and from the kitchen, but Alex couldn't have cared less. "Sit," Bellini said, his voice gruff, but not unkind. "I'll have Danny bring you something." Alex slid into the chair, setting his backpack carefully between his feet. The warmth of the restaurant was making him realize just how cold he'd been. His clothes were still damp from the rain, and he suppressed a shiver. "You like gumbo?" Bellini asked, already turning toward the kitchen. "I've never had it," Alex admitted. Bellini paused, looking back at him with raised eyebrows. "Never had?" He shook his head. "Well, today's your lucky day, then." Left alone at the table, Alex found himself the subject of curious glances from both staff and customers. Word of his performance had spread quickly through the restaurant. He kept his eyes down, uncomfortable with the attention. A server, Danny, he presumed, appeared with a glass of water and a basket of warm bread. "Boss says to bring you this while you wait," she said, setting them down. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. "You need anything else right away?" The bread smelled incredible. Alex's hands actually trembled as he reached for a piece, but he paused. "This isn't part of the meal, is it? I don't want to take more than we agreed." Danny's expression softened. "Honey, the bread comes with every meal. It's included." She pushed the basket closer to him. "Go on." The first bite of warm, fresh bread nearly brought tears to his eyes. He chewed slowly, savoring it, trying not to devour it like the starving man he was. "That was some playing," Danny commented, watching him. "We haven't had anyone touch that piano in months who knew what they were doing." Alex swallowed before answering. "Thank you. Where'd you learn to play like that?" "I studied it." He stopped himself. "Just had good teachers. My grandmother started me young." Danny nodded, seeming to sense his reluctance to talk about himself. "Well, you've certainly made an impression on Tom. He doesn't usually let people play that old thing." Before Alex could respond, Bellini returned carrying a large bowl himself, rather than having a server bring it. Steam rose from the rich, dark broth, and the smell that hit Alex's nose was complex and mouth-watering. Spicy, savory, and somehow deeply comforting. "House specialty," Bellini said, setting the bowl down. "Family recipe. Eat it while it's hot." Alex stared at the generous portion, far more than he had expected. "This is too much," he said quietly. "Our deal was just a meal." "This is a meal," Bellini replied firmly. "In New Orleans, we don't mess around with small portions." He pulled out the chair across from Alex and sat down, surprising him. "Besides, I'm not done talking to you yet." Alex cautiously took a spoonful of the gumbo. The flavor was incredible, rich and complex, with heat that built slowly rather than overwhelming. Despite his hunger, he forced himself to eat slowly, knowing his shrunken stomach might rebel if he rushed. "Where'd you study?" Bellini asked abruptly. Alex hesitated, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Does it matter?" "It might." After a moment's consideration, Alex answered. "Eastman. Then a year at Juilliard before I had to leave." Bellini whistled softly. "Those aren't exactly community colleges." "Scholarships?" Alex nodded, taking another careful spoonful. "Full ride at both. But when my grandmother got sick..." He trailed off, not wanting to get into the whole story. "And now you're here, playing for food." Bellini's tone wasn't judgmental, merely stating facts. "Life comes at you fast sometimes, doesn't it?" Alex gave a small, humorless laugh. "You could say that." They sat in silence for a few minutes as Alex continued eating. The gumbo was working magic, each spoonful seeming to restore a bit of his energy, a bit of his hope. "That piece you played," Bellini said finally. "I've never heard it before." "What was it?" "Something I wrote," Alex replied. "For my grandmother during her last few months." Bellini's eyebrows rose slightly. "You wrote that?" Original composition? Alex nodded. Huh. Bellini leaned back in his chair, studying Alex with renewed interest. You got anywhere to stay tonight, kid? The question caught Alex off guard. He hesitated, then shook his head. I've been figuring it out day by day. Meaning you've been sleeping on the streets. Bellini's bluntness was somehow easier to take than pity would have been. Sometimes. Shelters when I can get in. Alex shrugged, trying for nonchalance. It's temporary. Bellini drummed his fingers on the table, seemingly deep in thought. The restaurant around them had returned to its normal rhythm, though Alex still caught occasional curious glances. I've got a proposition for you, Bellini said finally. That old piano's been sitting there mostly unused for almost a year now. I've had a few people try out, but none of them had what this place needs. Alex set down his spoon, listening carefully. I can't offer much, Bellini continued, but I can offer you this. You play here Thursday through Sunday, 7 to midnight. In exchange, you get meals on the days you play plus $100 a week and... He hesitated as if questioning his own judgment. You can sleep in the storage room upstairs. It's small and it's nothing fancy, but it's dry and it's got a lock on the door. Alex stared at him, too stunned to reply immediately. Look, I'm not running a charity here, Bellini continued, perhaps misinterpreting Alex's silence. This is business. Live music brings in customers, especially if it's good. What you played today? That was good, different, and this is New Orleans. People come here expecting music with their meals. Why me? Alex asked finally. You don't know anything about me. I know you play like you've got something to say, Bellini replied simply. That's rare, and I know what it sounds like when someone's playing for their life. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. I also know this arrangement would be temporary. Someone with your talent isn't going to be playing in a corner of my restaurant forever, but for now, maybe we can help each other out. Alex considered the offer. A place to sleep, regular meals, a small income, and most importantly, a piano to play. After weeks of uncertainty, it seemed almost too good to be true. There's a shower in the employee bathroom you can use, Bellini added, seeming to read Alex's hesitation. And a washer and dryer in the back for the kitchen linens. You can use those too. Why are you doing this? Alex couldn't help but ask. Bellini was quiet for a long moment. 25 years ago, I was where you are, he said finally. Difference is nobody gave me a chance. I had to claw my way up from nothing. Somebody with your kind of talent deserves at least one break. He shrugged as if embarrassed by this moment of sentimentality. Besides, like I said, it's business. You'll bring in customers. Alex looked down at his now empty bowl, then around at the warm, bustling restaurant. Outside, he could hear the rain still falling heavily. When would I start? He asked. Tonight, if you're up to it. If not, tomorrow. Despite his exhaustion, the thought of having to spend another night figuring out where to sleep made the decision easy. I can start tonight. Bellini nodded, seemingly pleased. Good. Danny will show you the room upstairs after you finish eating. There's an old cot up there. Not the most comfortable, but better than the street. You can get cleaned up, rest a bit, and start playing around 7. He stood up. I'll have her bring you another bowl. You look like you could use it. Before Alex could thank him, Bellini was already walking away, stopping to chat with customers and check on servers as if their conversation had been nothing more than a brief business transaction. Danny returned a few minutes later with another bowl of gumbo and a glass of sweet tea. Heard you're our new piano man, she said with a smile. About time that old thing got some proper use. Thanks, Alex said, genuinely grateful. For everything. Don't thank me, thank Tom. He acts tough, but he's got a soft spot for strays. His wife Leah was the same way before she passed. Danny set the food down. Finish up and I'll show you where you'll be staying. The storage room, as it turned out, was small but clean. A narrow cot had been set up along one wall, with a lamp on an overturned crate beside it. Shelves lined the other walls filled with extra supplies for the restaurant, napkins, straws, to-go containers, and the like. Bathrooms at the end of the hall, Danny explained. There's clean towels in the cabinet. Washer and dryer are downstairs near the back exit. This is perfect, Alex said, and he meant it. After weeks of uncertainty, even this small space felt like luxury. Get some rest, Danny advised. You look dead on your feet. I'll come get you around 6:30 so you can get something to eat before you play. Left alone, Alex set his backpack down and sat on the edge of the cot, For the first time in weeks, he allowed himself to feel a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, a small room, meals, a chance to play, but it was something. A foothold, a chance to catch his breath and figure out what came next. He stretched out on the cot, surprised by how comfortable it felt to his exhausted body. Through the small window, he could see the rain still falling over the city, but for once he was dry and warm and fed. As sleep began to claim him, Alex thought of his grandmother. "I'm okay, Nai," he whispered. "I think I might be okay." The knock on the door startled Alex awake. For a disorienting moment, he couldn't remember where he was. The unfamiliar ceiling, the narrow cot beneath him, the shelves of restaurant supplies. Then it all came rushing back. "Alex? It's Danny, 6:30, like I promised." He sat up quickly, running a hand through his hair. "Coming," he called, his voice rough with sleep. Despite having slept only a few hours, he felt more rested than he had in weeks. After a quick shower, the first proper one he'd had in days, and a change into the cleanest clothes from his backpack, Alex felt almost human again. The face that looked back at him from the bathroom mirror was still thin, with dark circles under the eyes, but some of the desperation had faded. Downstairs, the restaurant was beginning to fill for the dinner rush. The energy was different from the afternoon, more lively with louder conversations and the clink of glasses from the bar. Alex made his way to the kitchen where Danny had told him to meet her. "There he is," she said when she spotted him. "Feeling better?" Alex nodded. "Much, thank you." "Good. Tom said to feed you before you start playing." "What'll it be? Anything on the menu?" The idea of having choices after days of taking whatever he could get was almost overwhelming. "What do you recommend?" he asked. "The jambalaya's good tonight. Chef's in a good mood." "That sounds perfect." Danny led him to the same corner table where he'd sat earlier. "I'll bring it right out. You've got about 20 minutes before Tom wants you to start playing." Left alone again, Alex took in the restaurant with new eyes. The dinner crowd was different from the lunch patrons. More locals than tourists, it seemed. The lighting was dimmer, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. Behind the bar, a tall, lean man with gray dreadlocks tied back from his face mixed drinks with practiced efficiency, occasionally joining in conversation with the customers seated before him. Bellini moved through the restaurant like a captain on his ship, stopping to chat with regulars, checking in with servers, making small adjustments to table settings as he passed. There was pride in his movements, in the way his eyes swept over the room. This place was clearly more than just a business to him. The jambalaya, when Danny brought it, was spicy and flavorful, with chunks of sausage and shrimp mixed with the rice. Alex ate slowly, savoring each bite, still mindful of his stomach after days of too little food. As he was finishing, Bellini approached his table. "Ready to earn your keep?" he asked, but the gruffness in his voice was softened by the slight smile that accompanied it. Alex nodded. "Yes, sir. Drop the sir. Makes me feel old. It's just Tom." He gestured toward the piano in the corner. "I had Luis dust it off while you were resting. Still needs a proper tuning, but it's better than it was." "Thank you," Alex said. "I appreciate the opportunity. Don't thank me yet. Let's see if you can keep a crowd happy for more than one song." There was a challenge in Bellini's voice, but not an unkind one. Most of these folks are regulars. They can be a tough crowd if they don't like what they're hearing. Alex pushed back from the table, ready to rise to the challenge. "What kind of music do they prefer?" "Mix it up. Some standards they can hum along to. Some jazz to remind them they're in New Orleans. Throw in some of your original stuff too. That's what got my attention." Bellini shrugged. "Read the room. You'll figure it out." As Alex made his way to the piano, he felt a flutter of nervousness in his stomach that had nothing to do with the meal he'd just eaten. It had been months since he'd played for a real audience. The stakes felt different now. Not just a meal, but a chance at rebuilding some kind of life. The piano bench felt more stable than it had earlier. Someone had fixed the wobble. He adjusted it, then flexed his fingers, considering where to start. The restaurant buzz continued around him, no one paying particular attention to him yet. That was good. It gave him a chance to settle in without the pressure of all eyes on him. He started with something gentle, a jazz standard, Autumn Leaves, arranged simply but with enough complexity to showcase his training. He kept it soft at first, background music rather than a performance, letting the notes float above the conversations rather than demanding attention. A few heads turned in his direction, But most people continued their meals and discussions. That was fine with Alex. He transitioned smoothly into Fly Me to the Moon, adding more flourishes, gradually increasing his volume just a bit. More people began to notice. He saw a few smiles, a couple nodding along. At the bar, the bartender gave him an approving nod. Encouraged, Alex shifted to something more distinctly New Orleans, a Professor Longhair tune that he remembered from his music history classes. His classical training made some of the rhythms challenging, but he found his groove, fingers bouncing along the keys with growing confidence. A man at a nearby table caught his eye and raised his glass in appreciation. An older couple began to sway slightly in their seats. The energy in the room was shifting, a subtle change, but one Alex could feel as clearly as the keys beneath his fingers. For the next piece, he chose something original, not the composition he'd played earlier, but something lighter, a piece he'd written during his first year at Juilliard. It had elements of classical structure, but was infused with the jazz influences he'd been studying at the time. As he played, he noticed a hush falling over the section of the restaurant nearest the piano. Conversations quieted. A server paused in the middle of taking an order, listening. Even Bellini, wiping down the bar, had stopped to watch. Alex closed his eyes, letting the music take over. For the first time in months, he felt completely present, completely alive. The hunger, the uncertainty, the grief, it all faded into the background. There was only the music, flowing from his fingers as naturally as breathing. When he finished the piece, there was a moment of silence, then a scattered applause broke out, not the polite, obligatory kind, but genuine appreciation. Alex opened his eyes, somewhat startled by the response. He gave a small nod of acknowledgement, then, without pausing, transitioned into a lively rendition of When the Saints Go Marching In. A bit obvious, perhaps, but he played it with enough unique flourishes to make it his own. That really got the crowd going. Someone whooped from the back of the restaurant. The older couple was now full-on dancing beside their table. Even the servers were moving with a bit more bounce in their step as they navigated between tables. For the next hour, Alex played without pause, moving from one piece to the next, reading the room as Bellini had suggested. When the energy needed lifting, he played something upbeat. When conversations grew too loud, he shifted to something more contemplative that brought the volume back down. He mixed familiar tunes with his own compositions, traditional jazz with classical influences, even threw in a few pop songs reworked with complex harmonies. Time seemed to slip away as he played, the restaurant becoming an extension of the music rather than just a setting for it. During a brief pause between songs, a server he hadn't met before appeared at his elbow with a glass of water. "From Tom," she said. "He says pace yourself. You've still got 3 hours to go." Alex accepted the water gratefully, suddenly aware of how thirsty he was. As he took a sip, he glanced around the restaurant and was surprised to see that it was now completely full, with people even waiting by the door for tables. Had it been that way when he started playing? He couldn't remember. Bellini caught his eye from across the room and gave him a small nod. Not quite a smile, but definitely approval. Alex nodded back, then returned his attention to the keys. For his next piece, he decided to take a risk. He began with a simple, haunting melody, the beginning of a traditional Chinese folk song his grandmother had taught him. It was in a minor key, melancholy but beautiful. As he played, he gradually integrated elements of jazz, transforming the ancient tune into something new yet respectful of its origins. The restaurant grew quiet again, but a different kind of quiet than before, an attentive silence, as if the room was collectively holding its breath. Even the kitchen staff had paused in their work, standing in the doorway to listen. When the final notes faded, there was a beat of silence, then enthusiastic applause broke out across the restaurant. Someone at the bar shouted, "Encore!" A woman near the front wiped a tear from her eye. Alex felt a surge of emotion so strong it nearly overwhelmed him. He hadn't expected this response, hadn't realized how much he'd missed this connection with an audience, how much he'd needed it. As the applause continued, he caught sight of Bellini standing at the back of the restaurant. The older man's face was thoughtful, calculating almost, but there was something else there too, something that looked almost like pride. Alex took a deep breath and began to play again, pouring everything he had into the music. The fatigue from his long day, the emotional toll of the past months, none of it mattered. For the first time since his grandmother had fallen ill, He felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And as the night progressed, word began to spread through the restaurant and beyond. There was something special happening at Bellini's tonight, something you had to hear to believe. By the time midnight rolled around, there was a small crowd gathered outside the windows, peering in to catch a glimpse of the young man at the piano who had appeared out of nowhere and played as if his life depended on it. Which, in a way, it did. 2 weeks passed in a blur of music and routine. Alex woke each afternoon in his small room above the restaurant, showered, helped the staff with prep work. He'd insisted on earning his keep beyond just playing the piano, and then performed each night from 7 to midnight. The routine was exhausting but satisfying, a far cry from the uncertainty that had plagued him just weeks before. "Got something for you," Bellini said one afternoon, dropping a small envelope on the table where Alex sat eating his pre-performance meal. Alex wiped his hands and picked up the envelope. Inside was $120 in cash, $20 more than they had agreed upon for his weekly pay. "This is too much," Alex said, looking up at Bellini with confusion. "Tips," Bellini explained with a shrug. "People have been leaving them specifically for you. Some at the bar, some with their checks. Figured you earned it." "They've been leaving tips for the piano player?" Alex asked, genuinely surprised. In the 2 weeks he'd been at Bellini's, he'd been so focused on the music that he hadn't noticed. "Not the piano player," Bellini corrected. "You. They ask for you by name now." He pulled out a chair and sat down, his expression serious. "Listen, kid, I've been in this business 30 years. I know when something's happening. The past 2 weekends, we've had a line out the door. Weeknights, we're filling tables that haven't been filled in months. And it's not my gumbo that suddenly got better." Alex didn't know what to say. He'd noticed the restaurant seemed busier but had assumed it was normal fluctuation. "Check this out," Bellini continued, pulling out his phone. He tapped the screen a few times, then turned it around to show Alex. It was some kind of social media post, a video. Alex leaned forward to see better, and realized with a shock that it was him. Someone had recorded him playing his grandmother's song, the one with the Chinese folk melody woven into it. The caption read, "Hungry pianist at Bellini's on Bourbon Street. Most incredible thing I've heard in New Orleans, and that's saying something. Hidden talent, New Orleans, no piano." "There's more," Bellini said, scrolling through his phone. "Lots more. People have been posting about you all week. That one's got over 50,000 views." Alex stared at the phone, then at Bellini, feeling a strange mix of emotions. Pride, embarrassment, gratitude, and something like fear. "I didn't know," he said quietly. "Yeah, well, social media is not really your concern right now. What is your concern is that we're going to need to renegotiate our arrangement." Bellini put his phone away, his expression unreadable. Alex's heart sank. Was Bellini going to ask him to leave now that he'd brought in business? Did he want more in return for the room and meals? "What do you mean?" he asked cautiously. "I mean, you're bringing in customers. Lots of them. And they're spending money. More than covering your room and board, that's for sure." Bellini leaned back in his chair. "So here's the new deal. Your base pay goes up to $250 a week. You get 15% of the bar sales on nights you play. You still get your room and meals. But," he held up a finger, "I want 5 nights a week now instead of 4. Tuesday through Saturday. And I want you to do 2 sets, 7 to 9, then 10 to midnight with an hour break in between." Alex blinked, trying to process this unexpected turn. "That's very generous," he managed finally. "It's not generous, it's business," Bellini countered, but there was a hint of a smile on his face. "You're good for Bellini's, so Bellini's is going to be good for you. That's how this works." "Thank you," Alex said, genuinely moved. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes and then go get ready to play. We're already half full and it's not even 6 yet." After Bellini left, Alex sat for a moment trying to absorb what had just happened. His weekly income had more than tripled in a matter of minutes. He looked down at the cash in the envelope, then pulled out his phone, an old model with a cracked screen. He hadn't checked it much in the past weeks, trying to conserve the battery and having little reason to use it anyway. There were several notifications, emails, social media alerts. Curious, he opened his email and found a message from his old professor at Juilliard. "Dr. Chen, Alex, I don't know if you'll get this, but a former student sent me a video of someone playing in New Orleans who looks remarkably like you. If it is you, please know that people here have been worried. Your scholarship situation may be more flexible than you were led to believe. Call me when you can. The email was dated just 2 days ago. Alex stared at it, a mixture of hope and anxiety swirling in his chest. He had left New York in such a rush, burning with the shame of his perceived failure, not even saying proper goodbyes. Could there really be a way back? But did he even want to go back? These past 2 weeks at Bellini's had awakened something in him, a joy in playing that he had begun to lose in the rigid academic environment. Here he could experiment, could blend genres and styles in ways that would have been frowned upon in his classical training. Putting the phone away, Alex finished his meal and went to get ready for the evening's performance. Tonight's crowd would be larger than usual, according to Bellini, and he wanted to be prepared. When he emerged from his room at 6:30, he was surprised to find the restaurant already nearly full. As he made his way to the piano, he noticed something different about the crowd. Mixed in with the usual locals were people who looked like tourists, but not the typical Bourbon Street party seekers. These were older, more sophisticated, the kind of people who might attend symphony performances or jazz festivals. "They're here for you," Danny said, appearing at his elbow with a glass of water. "That couple over there drove in from Baton Rouge just to hear you play." "And that group by the window? Music teachers from the university." Alex felt a flutter of nerves. It was one thing to play for casual diners who might or might not be paying attention. It was another to play for people who had come specifically to hear him, who might have the musical knowledge to recognize any mistakes. "You'll be fine," Danny assured him, seeming to sense his anxiety. "Just play like you always do." Taking a deep breath, Alex sat at the piano. The room quieted almost immediately, another change from his first days when he'd had to gradually earn the crowd's attention. Now they were waiting for him to begin. He started with a piece he'd been working on all week, a complex arrangement of a simple folk tune, building it layer by layer into something rich and unexpected. As he played, he could feel the focus of the room on him, but instead of making him nervous, it energized him. There was a connection here, a dialogue between him and the audience that transcended words. Midway through his first set, the front door opened, and a tall woman in elegant clothing entered. She stood quietly by the door, listening, her expression thoughtful. There was something about her that suggested authority, education. After a few minutes, Bellini approached her and they had a brief conversation. She nodded, then moved to a small table that Bellini indicated. Alex continued playing, but he was aware of the woman watching him with unusual intensity. During his break between sets, as he sat at the bar sipping a ginger ale, she approached him. "Excuse me," she said, her voice cultured, with just a hint of a southern accent. "I'm Dr. Willow Kent, chair of the music department at Tulane University. I wonder if I might have a word with you." Surprised, Alex nodded, gesturing to the empty stool beside him. "Of course. I'll be direct," Dr. Kent said, taking the seat. "I heard about you from a colleague who was here last weekend. I'll admit I was skeptical. People tend to exaggerate. But having heard you play, I understand the excitement." She paused, studying him. "Your technique is exceptional. Juilliard or Curtis?" "Juilliard," Alex admitted. "For a year. Before that, Eastman." She nodded as if this confirmed something for her. "And now you're playing in a restaurant on Bourbon Street. An unusual career trajectory." There was no judgment in her tone, only curiosity. But Alex felt a need to explain anyway. "Life took some unexpected turns. My grandmother got sick. I had to leave school. This is just temporary until I figure things out." "I see." Dr. Kent considered him for a moment. "Mr. Bellini tells me you compose as well." "I do." Alex nodded. "Most of what I played tonight was original." "That's what I found most interesting. Your classical training is evident, but there's something else in your compositions, a fusion of traditions that's quite compelling." She reached into her bag and pulled out a business card. "Tulane has a small but vibrant music department. We also have connections with the New Orleans Symphony and various jazz institutions in the city. I'd like to talk with you about some possibilities if you're interested." Alex took the card, stunned. "What kind of possibilities?" "That depends on what you want. There might be scholarship opportunities if you wish to continue your education, or performance opportunities if you're looking to build a professional career right away. Either way, talent like yours shouldn't be hidden away in a restaurant, as charming as this one is." Before Alex could respond, a commotion near the door caught their attention. A group of young people had entered, phones held high, scanning the room. "There he is," one of them exclaimed, pointing toward Alex. "That's the piano guy from the video." Dr. Kent raised an eyebrow. "It seems your public awaits," she said with a slight smile. "Think about what I've said. Call me next week and we can discuss details." She stood up. "For now, I'll leave you to your admirers. But Mr. Lin, don't sell yourself short. What you have is rare, and it deserves to be nurtured properly." As she walked away, the group of newcomers approached, excited and a bit awestruck. "Are you really the guy from the video?" a young woman asked. "The one playing that amazing Chinese jazz fusion thing? We've been looking all over for this place," her friend added. "Your video's gone viral, man." Alex glanced at Bellini, who was watching the scene with a knowing look. The older man gave him a small nod as if to say, "I told you so." Turning back to his unexpected fans, Alex managed a smile. "Yes, that's me. I'll be playing again in a few minutes if you'd like to stay and listen." "Are you kidding? We're not going anywhere." They eagerly found places at the bar, ordering drinks, their excitement palpable. As Alex made his way back to the piano for his second set, he felt a strange sense of coming full circle. Just 2 weeks ago, he had stood outside this very restaurant, hungry and desperate, offering to play for food. Now people were coming specifically to hear him play. Dr. Kent's card seemed to burn in his pocket. Possibilities were opening up that he hadn't dared to imagine. For the first time in a long time, the future looked bright with promise. Sitting down at the piano, Alex flexed his fingers and began to play, pouring his gratitude, his hope, and his newfound confidence into the music. The room fell silent once more, captivated by the sounds emerging from the once neglected piano in the corner of Bellini's. 18 months could change everything, Alex thought as he stood backstage at Royce Hall. The grand concert venue at UCLA was a far cry from the corner piano at Bellini's. Yet in many ways, the journey from one to the other felt both impossibly long and surprisingly short. 5 minutes. "Mr. Lin," a stagehand said, poking his head through the door of the small green room. "Thank you," Alex replied, adjusting his cuffs. The suit he wore was tailored, another novelty in a life that had become filled with them. He caught his reflection in the mirror. Gone was the desperate young man with hollow cheeks and uncertainty in his eyes. The person who looked back at him now stood straighter, with confidence that came from more than just a full stomach and decent clothes. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he called. The door opened to reveal Dr. Kent. Elegant as always in a simple black dress, her silver hair swept into a neat bun. "Ready for your Los Angeles debut?" she asked with a smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Alex answered, returning her smile, "though it feels strange being so far from New Orleans. I've gotten used to it being home." "It still is home," she reminded him. "This is just a visit, a rather important one, but still just a visit." Dr. Kent had become more than just a mentor over the past year and a half. After their initial meeting at Bellini's, she had helped Alex navigate his re-entry into the academic world, not as a traditional student this time, but as a teacher-performer in residence at Tulane, where he both studied and taught. The position came with a small stipend and the flexibility to continue his regular performances at Bellini's while he finished his degree. "The hall is nearly full," Dr. Kent continued, "and I spotted Tom in the third row looking very uncomfortable in his suit." Alex laughed at the image. "I still can't believe he flew all the way out here." "Of course he did. He wouldn't miss this for the world, even if he'll complain about California the entire time." She paused, her expression growing more serious. "Your grandmother would be proud, Alex, extremely proud." The mention of his grandmother brought a familiar pang of grief, but it was softer now, tempered by time and by the knowledge that he had honored her sacrifices. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I know so." Dr. Kent gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Now I'll leave you to your final preparations. But Alex, enjoy this moment. You've earned it." After she left, Alex sat at the small piano in the green room, not to play but simply to feel the keys beneath his fingers, a ritual he had developed before every performance. So much had happened since that rainy night when he had stood outside Bellini's, hungry and desperate. The viral videos had been just the beginning. Local news had picked up the story of the hungry pianist, as someone had dubbed him, the classically trained musician who had fallen on hard times and found redemption through his art. Then national outlets became interested. A feature in the Times-Picayune led to a segment on NPR, which led to appearances on morning television. People were captivated not just by his playing, but by his story. Through it all, Bellini's remained his anchor. Even as bigger venues in New Orleans began to call, offering him featured spots, Alex kept his promise to Tom, playing 5 nights a week at the restaurant that had given him a chance when he had nothing to offer but his music. "It's not about loyalty," he had explained to Dr. Kent when she questioned why he didn't move on to more prestigious venues. "It's about remembering where you came from. Without Bellini's, without Tom taking a chance on me, none of this would be happening." The arrangement had worked well for everyone. Bellini's became a destination, rather than just another restaurant on Bourbon Street. Reservations were booked weeks in advance by people eager to hear that pianist from the videos in his original setting. Tom had eventually hired a second piano player for Alex's nights off, but as he gruffly admitted, "Nobody plays like you, kid." The call from UCLA had come as a surprise. They were hosting a special concert series highlighting new American composers and wanted Alex to perform his original work, Hunger, the piece he had expanded from his grandmother's song into a full concerto. 2 minutes. "Mr. Lynn," the stagehand called through the door. Alex stood, taking a deep breath. On the small table beside the mirror lay the treasured photo he carried to every performance. His grandmother at her 70th birthday, laughing as she sat at the upright piano in their small apartment. He touched it gently. "Watch over me tonight, Nai," he whispered. Stepping into the wings of the stage, Alex could hear the murmur of the audience settling in. The concert hall was much larger than any venue he had played before, with seating for nearly 2,000. According to the event organizers, they had sold out weeks ago. The orchestra was already seated, the musicians adjusting their instruments, the conductor reviewing last-minute notes. Alex had spent 3 intensive days rehearsing with them, but still felt a flutter of nerves. His composition demanded a lot from the orchestra, perhaps too much for someone with his limited formal training in orchestration. But Dr. Kent had connected him with professors at Tulane who helped him refine the score, turning his piano composition into something that could be shared among many instruments while still maintaining its heart. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice rang out over the hall, "UCLA Performing Arts is proud to present, as part of our New American Composers series, Mr. Alex Lynn performing his original composition, Hunger, accompanied by the Los Angeles Chamber Orchestra." The applause that greeted him as he walked onto the stage was enthusiastic. Alex acknowledged it with a small bow, then took his place at the gleaming grand piano at center stage. As the applause died down, he caught sight of Tom Bellini in the 3rd row, just as Dr. Kent had said. Beside him sat Danny, who had apparently made the trip as well. They both gave him small nods of encouragement. The conductor raised his baton. Alex placed his hands on the keys. A moment of perfect silence fell over the hall. Then the music began. The opening notes were spare, delicate, a simple melody that spoke of loss and longing. Alex had structured the concerto to tell a story, beginning with his grandmother's illness and his departure from school, moving through his desperate journey and arrival at Bellini's, and finally celebrating his rediscovery of purpose and hope. As the orchestra joined in, adding depth and color to the narrative, Alex felt himself transported back to each moment, the rain on his face as he stood outside the restaurant, the warmth of that first bowl of gumbo, the wobble of the piano bench as he played his first notes at Bellini's, the gradual filling of the restaurant as word of his music spread. The second movement began, darker and more turbulent, capturing the uncertainty and fear of those days when he hadn't known where